He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Just a quick warning, this podcast contains strong language and descriptions of violence some listeners might find confronting. On the 6th of January 1985, Darcy to Hira was feeling good. The 40-year-old had only 3 days to go on a 6-month sentence in Auckland's Mount Eden prison. No stranger to life behind bars, Darcy looked the part too. 5'7", over 100 kilos, strongly built and covered in tattoos. Darcy's life had been tough. He'd lost both parents as a boy and quickly went off the rails. But just before this stint in prison, everything had changed. His life was going to be different. Darcy had turned over a new leaf, and for good behaviour, he was getting out early.
He was just caring, gentle, fun-loving.
Back to his new wife Suzanne, back to family, back to freedom.
He was, wanted to get out there Monday. Sorry. He just sounded so happy when he talked to me that he was, going to be home and...
Around 7:20 that Sunday morning, Darcy did what he always had, grabbed some breakfast from the prison kitchen and sat down to eat in the lunchroom. Minutes later, a guard found Darcy slumped in his chair, convulsing uncontrollably. There was no blood, but Darcy had been brutally beaten with a blunt instrument, sustaining multiple skull fractures and massive brain damage. He was rushed to the hospital, though there was nothing that could be done. It was what a judge would later call a vicious and savage killing. 2 months would pass before another prisoner, Ross Appelgren, was arrested and charged with his murder.
An inmate was killed, and I ended up getting the blame for it.
You didn't do it?
No, I didn't.
Who did do it?
I don't know.
The Crown case at the trials was that Appelgren killed him after a drug deal went wrong.
On paper, it looked like an easy crime to solve, a murder inside a locked building with a limited number of suspects. Police were adamant they got the right man.
You're convinced that justice was done?
Yes. After all, they had an inmate who claimed he'd witnessed the killing.
I then saw Ross swing the pedal over his right shoulder and round to his left, and I heard the sound of a crack.
And another who said Ross confessed.
He'd been ripped off for an ounce of dope. He said he smashed him over the head, and if he dies it will be the perfect murder because of the lack of blood.
A prosecution case that was so simple, so concise, so easy for jurors to understand. But as you'll hear, there was so much left out.
I think it's bad when they can do that, withhold evidence.
Because the reality is, nothing about this case is simple. It is instead one riddled with controversy. A jailhouse murder where the only witnesses were convicted crooks living under jailhouse rules. Those crims who testified for the Crown were presented as truth-tellers.
He was one of those guys who had no prestige in jail at all because he was just such a fucking liar. He just lied all the time. You couldn't believe anything he said.
But to their fellow inmates, they were branded simply as narcs.
Only one grade of offender below narcs, and that's child molesters.
For Ross Appelgren, he always maintained his murder charge solely relied on narcs selling authorities a pack of lies.
I think it stinks when they can pay, especially crims, money, offer them incentives to get out of jail, relocation, new identities, $30,000, $40,000 cash on their pockets. There's not a lot that would turn it down.
The details of these backroom deals reached with prosecution witnesses would take years to emerge, only wrestled into view after Ross went to extreme ends to clear his name.
For the first time on New Zealand radio, you will have a chance not only to hear, but to talk back with a convicted murderer on the run in this country. Ross Appelgren is on a telephone and he'll talk to us for the next 4 hours.
Well, I
believe that miscarriage of justice was done.
And despite twice being found guilty of murder, Ross refused to admit defeat.
I want my case back before the courts. If they release me, I'll carry on the fight.
He made New Zealand legal history, becoming the first person to obtain a rare Governor-General endorsed appeal against his conviction. Not once, but 2 times. However, Ross passed away without ever having his last appeal heard. And now, more than a decade after his death, his wife Julie is attempting to finish what he started.
A very happy ending it would be, but also vindication that he was right all along. And that sad he's not here, but then I could finally let it go.
And Julie's not the only woman searching for answers on behalf of a dead husband. So is Suzanne Young, the wife of the murder victim Darcy te Hira. Do you think either trial heard the full story of what happened to your husband?
No.
And how does that make you feel?
Angry. He was supposedly under the protection of the Crown. It should never have happened.
You're listening to Nark, an RNZ investigative podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wesley-Smith. This is episode 1. Tony. Justice has always interested me. I did a law degree, practiced law, and also worked as an investigator on inquiries into abuse in New Zealand's largest known case of child torture. But then I loved telling people stories too, so I became a journalist, working on some of New Zealand's biggest current affairs programs. And now I make podcasts in my spare time. But I can tell you, I never expected to start a prison murder podcast with a love story.
Tony came over and I remember him saying exactly when he came over to me, he says, "Hello, what's your name?" And that was me gone.
Really?
Yep.
It was like that?
Yep.
Like in the movies?
Yep.
This is Suzanne Young. She first met Darcy te Hira when she was only 19 years old, a nurse working at an Auckland rest home. Although Suzanne never calls him Darcy, she calls him by his other name, Anthony, or Tony for short. From the very start of my investigation, I'd wanted to talk to Suzanne. As Tony's wife, I just thought it was fair she knew what I was doing. I was also keen to hear her perspective on Tony and what had happened to him. When investigating something like this, you have to make dozens of cold calls, and you soon get used to the blow-offs, the F-offs, or the "I'm not interested" responses. But if there's one thing I'll never get used to, it's contacting someone like Suzanne, someone whose loved one has been murdered. So yeah, I'll admit I was bloody anxious. I decided to send her a letter asking if she'd be prepared to speak to me. It was a nervous wait. A week went by, and then she called. As I feared, my inquiry had caught her completely by surprise and brought the old painful memories flooding back. And as she talked, I felt an instant rush of guilt. But that soon subsided as Suzanne said, actually, yeah, she would be happy to meet to talk about her Tony. Because as I would discover, she had her own unanswered questions. All right. So that's how we came to meet at Papakura Library. Suzanne looked a little nervous, which was fair enough. So was I.
Is that all right? Yeah.
Yep, perfect. Yep. We shook hands and I noticed she had a book clutched to her chest. We chatted a bit and then sat down in a private room. If you just want to clip that on your jersey top. I have to say, it's a little surreal meeting someone for the first time and then instantly diving into one of the worst moments of their life. Recording? But as Suzanne started talking about Tony, that initial nervousness, the awkwardness, it fell away. Her eyes sparkled, and you could see the teenager Tony had swept off her feet back in 1983.
It was just him and the way he was. It was just like his eyes, his everything. And I turned around and I thought, oh my God, it was like, yeah. It was like love at first sight. 6 months down the track, we were married.
Oh my gosh. The setting for Suzanne and Tony's love at first sight was perhaps unlikely. A power pulling contest at an Auckland pub called the Star Hotel. If you haven't heard of power pulling, Don't worry, neither had I.
I suppose it's like tug of war, but it was up off the ground.
Yeah.
And it was set up on like a big full board.
Yeah.
And they had foot stays and everything. So and then it was hard work. It was like, yeah, they had to train real hard. So my brother started it. Then I thought, I'll come along for a nosy, you know. They tried to get me involved. But no, I wasn't probably strong enough, and I got rope burns the first night, and that was me, I was done. But we were at the Star Hotel. They did a round robin, so they used to do Penrose, Otahu, all the round robins of the pubs.
And so a lot of people turned up to watch?
Oh, yeah. It was huge, yeah. They had white overalls and they had their logo on the back of their overalls.
Right.
It was quite big.
That night at the pub, Suzanne's brother Michael had managed to rope Tony, aka Darcy, into competing with his team. However, there was no way Tony started the evening expecting to pull his future wife, particularly someone who was quite a bit younger. So you were 19. You were 19 and
he was 39.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I see. So how old did he say he was?
I think he only said he was about 30. He was still in his 30s, but just a little bit further down so it didn't look so bad.
Because how early on in the conversation did the age thing come up? Like, he must have had to be pretty nimble.
He didn't say anything until probably, I think it was getting closer to the wedding.
Okay.
And he's like, I've got a confession. I said, what? He says, I'm older than what I said. I don't care. I don't care.
No,
it
just
was
a number.
like, yeah. So it was quite funny.
He must have been quite relieved that you had that reaction.
He was like, he just looked at me. I said, yeah, because he was a bit of a clown sometimes, our Tony, but yeah.
A clown, says Suzanne, but with a soft side too.
He put me on a pedestal. He literally put me on a pedestal. I tell people, and they think, nah. But yeah, he did. He just treated me so well. Very family orientated, just very caring.
At this point, Suzanne opened up the book she'd brought with her. It turned out to be a photo album filled with pictures of her and Tony's wedding. Up until this point, the only photo I'd seen of Tony was a typically unflattering mugshot. His hair scraggly and unkempt, a blank look on his face. Honestly, he looked like a pretty rough dude. But the Tony in the wedding album looked like a totally different guy. He looked handsome, dressed in a light grey suit with matching waistcoat and pink tie. Bride and groom are both beaming. What are your memories of the wedding day?
It was very, very cheap. I think the whole wedding light cost about $500 back in the day, but that was a lot of money back in the day. Mum did all the food. Mum did my wedding cake. Amazing wedding cake. It was a 3-tier. Had fresh flowers. I remember doing fresh flowers on top of it. Everybody my whole family just got together, helped do everything, my auntie and uncle. It was a beautiful day. We had umbrellas and chairs all around the backyard, and probably the most that stuck out in my mind was the celebrant. He was so hard case. It was one of Dad's mates. And I thought, oh my God, he had no teeth. And he said, it's all right. He said, I've put them in on special occasions, weddings and funerals.
And was Tony nervous on the day?
No, everybody, all his family was there. His brother to come up from New Plymouth, they'd come from, the ones from up north came down. It was just a lovely, it was really relaxed, chilled out, sort of.
The best type of weddings.
Yeah.
Then, less than a year later, Tony was dead.
Yeah, our first wedding anniversary it was going to be. And that was another reason he wanted to get out that Monday. Sorry. And he just sounded so happy when he talked to me that he was, going to be home and...
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
I thought I was going to be all right up until now.
Sorry.
Oh, shit.
You've been doing really well.
Oh, God, sorry.
No, you don't need to apologise at all.
Yeah.
So it's had a lasting impact.
Yeah. I suffer post-trauma. I'm on medication.
Yeah.
That's what, started it, and I've had so much trauma since.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I lived my life on medication. I've had literally a breakdown through stuff that's happened. And, yeah. And as I tell people, it never goes away. It's in the back of your mind, but it never. The stuff you remember is the trauma you remember.
February.
Hira was killed 3 days before he was due to be released.
Skull crushed like an eggshell.
Darcy to Hira received massive damage to his head, delivered by a wooden paddle used to stir the porridge.
Ross Appelgren was accused of and convicted of that murder.
While these events were all through the news at the time, 40 years later, details of what happened in Mount Eden prison that day have faded from memory for most. While sifting through the court documents relating to Ross Appelgren's 2 trials and the many media articles about the case, one thing stood out to me. As I sat with all this paperwork, I realised no one, not the police, not the prosecutor, nor the media, had really explained who Tony was, the victim at the centre of this terrible crime. Instead, he was often referred to simply as
a gang member serving a sentence for burglary.
While the judge at Appelgren's second trial, when explaining that it was the evidence that counts and not sympathy towards Tony, told the jury,
Mr. Tahira has been referred to in evidence but never really described. I do not imagine that he would be a person that would attract a great deal of sympathy on your part. He has, nevertheless, lost his life.
Those comments still rankle Suzanne, for whom Tony's memory is far from faded.
It's like, did he know him?
Yeah.
Like, how could he just judge by what happened to what sort of person he was?
Yeah.
I'm not saying Tony was any angel, but to me, it was, I just thought the whole thing was quite unfair, and it was quite hard.
Suzanne's right. For much of his teens through to his 30s, Tony was no angel. He did some bad things, 2 convictions for violence, and he also committed a whole lot of thefts and burglaries dating back to the early 1960s. All up, Tony spent more than 10 years in prison. Suzanne still remembers when he first met her parents in their working-class South Auckland home.
Mum took one look and thought, holy shit. Yeah, I could see the look on Mum's face. But he was just so warm and welcoming. Like, big hug, hi, him and Dad hit it off. And then later on when he'd gone, Mum thought, my God, Suzanne, blah, 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 blah. But really, after that, he was just around. He was just around all the time. He was so good to Mum and Dad, because he always talked about Mum and Dad and
So he called your parents Mum and Dad?
Yeah. It was always Mum and Dad. Yeah.
And what?
Because he lost his parents, I think, quite young.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah.
So they filled a.
So I think he got on so well with them because of that reason, I think. Yeah.
Tony was born in Northland on the 4th of March 1944. When he was around 5, he moved with his family to South Auckland. Tragically, he lost his dad in 1957, followed just a year later by the death of his mum. Tony's probation reports describe his early years as harsh. He went into state care and in 1963 was convicted for dishonesty offences and sent to Borstal, a detention facility for young offenders. With a tendency for pinching other people's belongings, Tony was frequently living at Her Majesty's pleasure for much of the 1960s, 70s and early 80s. One justice official remarked, "Prison has become home to him." And pre-release reports in the 1970s described Tony as
a likeable rogue when things go his way, very persistent and unrelenting when he wants something, and is strongly motivated in attaining goals when they concern his comfort and personal welfare. He is a good worker, cooperative and obliging to a degree. His prognosis does not seem to be attractive.
During sentencing on yet another theft charge, one judge told Tony, "It seems that you are incapable of controlling yourself. Anything that is not screwed down is in peril when you are about." But as he got older, the peril Tony posed seemed to diminish. In May 1981, in his last stretch in prison before meeting Suzanne, a group of prison guards supported Tony's application for early release. Here's what they wrote.
Jovial type, no behavioural problems.
He's been a reliable and conscientious worker.
And his conduct has been of a high standard.
Known for years. Good worker.
And former prison staff I spoke to for this podcast also described Tony in positive terms.
Oh, he was always quiet, cooperative.
This is a former Mount Eden prison guard. We've disguised his voice and we'll call him James. There are a bunch of people who either worked in the prison system or were inmates with Ross and Tony that I really needed to speak with to get the full picture of this case. Understandably, many have got very different lives these days and so don't want their identities and pasts made so public. There are also court orders preventing me from naming some of the inmates who gave evidence. And to prevent indirectly identifying them, I've given all the inmates pseudonyms. Let's get back to the former guard we're calling James and his impression of Tony.
I think he was just one of those people when he was relating to prison staff who just wanted to get on with his lag and get out again. Very low risk of escape, very low risk of assault on staff. As far as I was aware, he was at low risk of assault from or to other prisoners. But obviously something happened that changed that.
Another ex-prison guard, Mark Anthony, also knew Tony at Mount Eden and often saw him working in the staff club.
A likeable sort of a character. He was quite a decent sort of a guy to talk to. They wouldn't have him over there unless he was quite approachable.
What gang did you understand him to be associated with?
I thought he was Black Power.
Black Power, for any overseas listeners, is one of New Zealand's largest and oldest criminal gangs. Tony's association with Black Power would feature in the police investigation into his murder. Several of the Black Power inmates told detectives they would deal to the person who'd bashed Tony. Former Mount Eden inmate Whiti Taito was not a member of Black Power, but knew Tony, or Darcy, as he was called inside.
A suggestion that Darcy had some association with Black Power, does that accord with your recollections of him?
I believe he did, yeah.
For her part, Suzanne doesn't recall Tony being tied up with Black Power. When they got together, she wanted to focus on the future, not delve into his past.
He never really said, and I never really wanted to know.
No.
I mean, his past was his past.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, yeah, I knew he probably wasn't, you know, the good boy that he should have been.
Right.
But I didn't see that. I didn't see that side of him.
She said Tony was the sort of guy who would stand up for others. She recalled a particular incident on a night out together.
He just stuck up for this guy. Yeah, he was getting beaten up real bad because Tony saw it and thought, oh my God. And he says, get under the table. I said, what? He says, I'm going to finish this for once and for all. And he picked this guy up and threw him straight away. And that was the end. Finish. End of story. He said, no. He said, I'm not having, He didn't like confrontation. He didn't like, that was a big no-no.
When Tony and Suzanne got together in 1983, it represented the start of a new chapter in his life. He stepped away from law-breaking, got a job, a home and a wife. Stability. But in August 1984, the past caught up with Tony. It turned out police had warrants for Tony's arrest, including for thefts committed before he met Suzanne.
I remember the morning they came to our place early in the morning and the police surrounded our house and said, Tony's under arrest, there's a warrant out for his arrest, blah, 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 blah. So I went and Tony was still in bed and I said, the police are here. And he said, oh, Jesus. He said, okay. So I went back out and I said, well, you'll have to wait. I said, Tony's still in bed, he'll have to get dressed and rah-de-rah-de-rah. And there was police at the back of the house, and it was just awful. I'd never experienced anything like it. And they were all, you could just, accept this one. And I said to you...
That one was one of the cops whose kindness that day has stayed with Suzanne all these years.
His name was Tony too, and he was so understanding, and obviously I was upset, and because all the other police were ready to put handcuffs and everything on him, and Officer Tony, he said, no, he said, just let him walk to the car. He said he'll be fine. Tony walked out, gave me a big kiss. He said, don't worry about it. And then Tony, the officer, came back and he said, look, if you want to come up, he said, come up to the police station. It's a big no-no, but under the circumstances, come up, I'll let you see Tony. And then by that time I'd gone and Tony was very emotional. They'd got him on, obviously, warrants for his arrest, unpaid fines and all the rest of it. So he had quite an outstanding number of fines. Then obviously didn't turn up to court when he should have, and then warrant for his arrest. And the story, that's where the story ends. He got arrested. Even the judge said, well, now we've got you. He said, we've got to do something with you, sort of thing. And then Mum and Dad put up their whole business, the house, everything, to see if, if it'd help.
The fact Tony had turned a corner was highlighted in the probation report prepared at his sentencing, with the writer saying,
it is noted that he has cast aside many of the trappings of his earlier existence, lack of industry, unkept appearance, and an apparent disregard for the consequences of his offending. In this interview, his concern that he should suffer an enforced separation from his wife appeared sincere, and was a marked departure from his carefree manner of earlier occasions when he has been interviewed in custody.
It's a bit of a common theme for guys like Tony. Talking to other ex-crims for this podcast, I learned that for many, a life of crime loses its appeal when you hit kind of your late 30s. You want to settle down, find some peace. I remember hearing one former inmate talk about it as reaching your criminal menopause. It seems like that was where Tony was heading when he was arrested that final time. He appeared in court for sentencing in September 1984.
I remember the judge saying, oh, I see you've got married and you've got a job and you've got, all settled down. But he said, we're going to give you some punishment.
That punishment was 6 months inside Mount Eden prison. Was Tony surprised at that sentence?
I don't know. I suppose Tony would just accept, okay, he done wrong.
Yeah.
I accept that I did wrong. Yeah. I'll just, I'll do what I have to do. He was never angry.
Once Tony started his sentence, Suzanne visited every week.
Every weekend, yeah. So every weekend I'd go up and see him. He'd give me a pass. They'd send me out a pass. I'd go up on a Saturday. He was allowed to ring me all the time because they thought he was such a, responsible sort of an inmate.
And would he tell you all the gritty details about prison life when you spoke to him or met with him? And why do you think he would not want to tell you that?
Probably because it had upset me.
Yeah.
What I saw at visitation was enough.
So yeah, just describe to me, what was that like?
The visitation, interesting. I saw a lot of stuff coming so corrupt that to me the whole place was corrupt. And I remember Tony always saying to me, just look at me, don't look left or right. Because, I saw stuff that was coming in and, my peripheral vision was quite good. I was still looking at Tony, but right next to me there was, girls always wore skirts, easy access. They'd either have, whether it was weapons or drugs or obviously hidden, I don't know whether it was up a vagina, up there, wherever, but the guys would be easy access, up through between the legs, up the skirt, and
And all in full view of the guards?
They knew, I'm sure they knew what was going in and out with just turn a blind eye. I was shocked. I was like, what the hell? And I suppose my look on my face told her, and that's why Tony says, just keep looking at me. And I said, well, this is insane.
One prison guard told me that staff nicknamed the Mount Eden visiting room the Passion Pit because of the sometimes, shall we say, lengthy, intimate contact that went on. For around 5 months, Suzanne continued her weekly visits. That was until the last week of Tony's life when he called her.
He said, I don't need you to come up this weekend to see me, because he said, I'll be out on Monday. And he said, I'll be waiting at the gate for you. And then the next thing he said, I think there is actually something going down. It's going to go down this weekend. And he said, I don't want you here.
Okay.
And then, but he said, I'll be waiting outside the gate on Monday for you.
Right.
Yeah. I think probably he knew that there might have been something going down, but whether he knew it was going to be him is the burning question, whether he actually knew.
So maybe Tony had a hint that something was coming the weekend he was killed. Something he didn't want Suzanne to know about. What was that thing? Well, we can't tell you because it was never investigated. That's something you're going to hear me say a lot in this podcast. This or that piece of evidence or information was never investigated or simply overlooked. And that call from Tony, well, that was the last time Suzanne ever spoke to her husband. On Sunday, January 6, 1985, 2 prison guards came to Suzanne's door unannounced. It was just after 8 in the morning.
The guards turned up in the prison van at my doorstep to say that Tony was in hospital. And then they said to me, Tony's had a seizure. We're going to take you up to the Auckland hospital where he is.
The guards made no mention that Tony had been attacked. They just said he'd had a seizure. Did he have a history of seizures?
No.
He'd never, no epilepsy, nothing like that?
Never.
No. I double-checked Suzanne's recollections against the official record, and she's right. There's nothing in Tony's prison health file about a history of seizures.
This is why I thought it was bizarre. And I thought, okay, so did as I was told, got in the van, they took me up to the hospital. They didn't say too much. They sort of talked to whoever it was, then left, and I was left sitting in the waiting room. And I actually contacted, Helen, my matron of honour.
Oh, yeah.
She was my best friend and her husband.
Yeah.
They came straight up, because by that time I was sort of, quite. They came straight up, and the doctor came out, and he said to me, are you Suzanne, blah, 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 and I said yes. And he said to me, I just need you to be prepared for what you're going to see. And I looked at him, I said, but hasn't he only just had a seizure? I remember that. I thought he'd just had a seizure. No, he hasn't had just a seizure. He said, be prepared for what you're about to see.
Right.
And I thought, So I went in with him, and he said he's had, blunt force trauma to the head. And I'm just thinking, what the hell? And when I saw him, oh my God, it was absolutely shocking, the state he was in. And because he was on life support, so he was actually brain dead.
Right.
They only had his heart beaten with the machine.
Okay.
So I think he was already brain dead when he arrived. The only thing that's keeping him alive is the respirator machine. Basically to pull the plugs now, there's no hope of him coming back. And if he ever did come back, he'd be just a vegetable anyway. I was there right through, I was there, I laid him out, he was there when they took him off the machine, I washed them all down, laid them all out.
A tender moment of dignity in a day filled with a stranger's brutality.
And one of the nurses ended up crying. She left because she didn't know how I could do it.
That thought certainly occurred to me. I couldn't help but remember this tragedy happened so close to a day that was meant to be so special for Suzanne and Tony. The first anniversary of their wedding. For a while after Tony died, Suzanne's life was a blur. Within 7 months, in July 1985, Ross Appelgren, a man she'd never heard Tony mention, stood trial for his murder. She remembers the wave of relief that swept over her when the jury delivered its verdict.
He was guilty.
Yeah.
I said, yay.
Do you remember, was that what you actually said out loud?
I was like how I felt.
Yeah.
I said, you deserve it. Like, justice has been served.
But it was a momentary respite as Suzanne came to terms with her new life, one without Tony in it.
I suppose I was still trying to process.
Yeah.
Like, I just couldn't believe that it had happened.
Yeah.
And I felt probably let down because I said I've had no support.
Yeah.
Literally no support from anyone.
So yeah, this is like the police, the Crown, there was no victim support. I don't even know if they existed
Nothing.
at that time.
Absolutely nothing. No counselling, I got no... Like, basically, Tony died, I had to go back to work. We were down to one income. We had bills, we had rent, we had everything. So I didn't have time to really grieve, and, you know, I was like, shit, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It just all came down, crashing down, basically. I was a mess. Absolute mess. Still couldn't get my head around, you know, what had happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, literally nobody was there for me except my family.
Suzanne and I chatted for ages about Tony that day in Papakura. In fact, we had to relocate to my car as I'd only booked the room at the library for an hour.
Oh, sorry. Yep, cool. I'll just move our stuff out. Sorry about that.
Amongst her reflections, it became clear that even all these years later, despite 2 trials examining the circumstances of Tony's death, Suzanne, like me, has unanswered questions.
I do wonder why it happened. How could it have happened? How much, perhaps, corruption was in the prisons at the time?
Suzanne points to the seemingly unimpeded flow of contraband and drugs into Mount Eden during her visits. She remembers Tony's comments in his last conversation to her over the phone, that something was about to go down. And she's never forgotten the strange attitude of the guards who took her to the hospital, how they just told her Tony had suffered a seizure.
Why would they say that to me?
Yeah.
When they knew damn well
Yeah.
what had happened.
That he had been assaulted.
Yeah.
That he had been blunt force trauma.
Yeah. Honestly, his eyes were out like tennis balls out of his head. He was just a mess. Massive, massive big bruising where obviously he'd tried to protect himself. It was just, the whole thing just to me is bizarre.
Suzanne also told me that when he died, Tony had closely cropped hair, so it wasn't like a head injury would have been hard to see. In the months following Tony's death, Suzanne did look for answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that something about this whole situation was just off. Is it too late for answers 40 years later? Well, not in my book, because that's what podcasts are for. Suzanne decided to fire off requests to corrections and police for information about Tony's death. And it turns out Suzanne's lingering questions are just the tip of a very large iceberg. Because there's a whole lot more where they came from. Like, why weren't the police called until hours after Tony Hira was found?
I'm absolutely gobsmacked, quite honestly, Mike. The delay that's unbelievable.
Why was the scene of the crime cleaned before the cops arrived, potentially destroying any hint of evidence?
To be honest, I was absolutely shocked after you told me.
Why, when police questioned the 18 inmates in the area when Tony was killed, did none of them say anything?
Definitely not cooperating with the authorities was The number one thing, probably inside prison and outside prison.
And why would police and prosecutors be so quick to trust the word of a 200 times convicted fraudster pointing the finger at Ross Appelgren, even after he changed his story?
The big lie was that someone knew all along that Ernie had said he knew nothing. The police had started talking deals and money even before he made a statement.
All that and much, much more coming up on the next episode of Nark. Thanks for listening to Nark, hosted and written by me, Mike Wesley Smith. I'm also extremely grateful to everyone who spoke with me for this podcast, especially Suzanne Young and Julia Appelgren. And if anyone listening has more information about this case, I'd be keen to hear from you. Send an email to nark@rnz.co.nz. Follow and listen to Nark wherever you get your podcasts, and if you've enjoyed it, use the share button to recommend it to a friend. Some more quick thank yous to Ngā Taonga and Mediaworks for some of the archival audio, and to the voice actors who helped bring some of the characters in this episode to life. Nigel Collins, Jack Sargent, Craig Jeanty, Jeremy Rees, Phil Vine, Trent St. Clair, Blair Stagpull, Jonathan Bell, Troy Stanton, and Elliot Samuels. The RNZ producers who worked on this episode were Liz Garton, William Ray, Duncan Smith, and Phil Vine. Audio engineers Rangi Powick, Hamish Webber, Jeremy Veal, and Jeremy Ansell all had a hand in making this episode sound so great. Thanks also to Steve Burridge and Jeremy Ansell for the studio wrangling, and to Kevin Golding for opening the doors to me every week after hours. Graphics were designed by Amrita Marks, and the shorthand page, where you can find more information on this story, was made by Hing-Yi Kong. Check it out at rnz.co.nz/nark. Tim Watkin is RNZ's Executive Editor Audio, and Brianna Uritich-Gregg is the Production Coordinator. You can find more of RNZ's great podcasts, like Kelly Talton's Last Treasure Hunt, on the RNZ website, rnz.co.nz/podcasts. Check them out. Bye for now.